Your destiny sealed by the swing of an obsidian club. Your worth measured in how many men you could drag screaming back to the capital. In ancient Mexico, the Aztec Empire built one of history's most terrifying military machines. And at the top sat the Jaguar Warriors, elite soldiers who lived and died for blood and glory. The Aztecs, who called themselves the Mexica, ran an empire from 1428 to 1521 across central Mexico. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, sat on an island in Lake Texcoco, connected by causeways, filled with canals, home to over 200,000 people. The Spanish would later call it the Venice of the New World. And this empire demanded tribute from every conquered people: coca beans, feathers, precious stones, and human lives. The sun god Huitzilopochtli needed fresh hearts to keep the cosmos running. Without sacrifice, the Aztecs believed the sun would stop rising. The world would end. The Jaguar Warriors were the hunters who fed those gods, capturing enemies alive and dragging them back for the priests. This is their life cycle, from birth to death, step by brutal step. Every Jaguar Warrior started as a screaming baby, and that first cry came loaded with prophecy. Aztec births were ritual events supervised by midwives who chanted prayers to Tlazolteotl, the goddess who cleansed sins during labor. When a boy was born, the umbilical cord got cut with a black obsidian knife, the same volcanic glass that would later edge as weapons. Here is where things get dark. That cord went straight to a conquered battlefield and got buried in the dirt. The Aztecs believed this tied the child to war from his first breath. Girls had their cords buried at the hearth, binding them to home. The message for the boys was clear: you will repay the gods with blood. The 260-day ritual calendar called Tonapawali also played a role. Priests consulted this calendar at every birth. If a baby arrived on a bad omen day, like one crocodile which predicted early death, families sometimes abandoned the infant in a canal. Quiet infanticide to prevent future suffering. Some families waited days to name their child, hoping to find a more favorable date in the calendar. And even without that, disease and malnutrition killed half of all Aztec children before age 5. Survivors were the lucky ones, if you can call entering this world lucky. From day one, boys were marked for combat. Fathers gave newborn sons tiny shields and arrows, miniature versions of real weapons. Mothers told stories of Huitzilopochtli, the sun god who murdered his own sister and 400 star siblings right after being born. These were bedtime stories. By age 3, boys followed their fathers to fields and workshops, learning the empire's rhythm: plant, harvest, pay tribute, or face punishment. Play meant wrestling with reed swords and practicing captures. By age 5, boys ran errands through markets where priests in blood-crusted robes dragged captives through the streets. The smell of copal incense mixed with copper, the smell of blood. Sacrifices happened monthly across the empire, around 20,000 victims per year. Children grew up hearing the screams. Discipline came fast and hard. A lazy look earned a slap. Stealing brought a beating with maguey thorns, the sharp spines of the agave plant. By age 10, boys grew a specific hairstyle called the Quexpalchicacpal, a lock of hair at the back of the neck that marked them as unproven youth. Only capturing an enemy in battle would earn them the right to cut it off. Failing to do so meant lifelong shame, a walking advertisement of cowardice. At 15, the real training began. Boys entered the Telpocali, which translates to House of Youth, a military barracks for commoners who wanted to become warriors. Every neighborhood in Tenochtitlan had one of these institutions. Noble families sent their sons to the Calmacac instead. Temple schools with priestly oversight where future leaders learned alongside future priests, but the Telpocali was where most Jaguar warriors came from. Enrollment was mandatory. Parents handed their sons over with ritual words. In your arms, we place him to become a young warrior in the House of Penance, where Eagle and Jaguar are born. Around 500 teenagers crammed into reed-thatched dorms around Tenochtitlan's neighborhoods, overseen by Telpoctlato, youth rulers who were scarred veterans with decades of combat experience. Dawn trumpet blast yanked boys from reed sleeping mats for roll call. Breakfast was atole, a thin maize porridge, if they'd earned it. Then came labor, hauling 50-pound loads of firewood from distant forests, backs whipped raw if anyone fell behind. This built the stamina needed to carry shields, weapons, and captured enemies across miles of terrain. Midday meant community service, digging canals or farming the floating garden plots called chinampas, bodies caked in mud. Evenings brought weapons drilled under torchlight, slingshots cracking the skulls of clay training dummies, spears hurled at straw targets. The surveillance never stopped. Elders spied on dormitories looking for any sign of weakness. Getting caught sipping pulque, sacred alcohol made from fermented agave, meant public beating. Romantic encounters meant death by stoning. One chronicler described a boy beaten nearly to death for stealing a single tortilla, his screams echoing through the barracks like a wounded animal. The Telpa Kali was a factory that processed boys into weapons, and the defective ones got discarded. Bullying was part of the curriculum. Senior students tormented the younger ones, calling them baby locks and predicting their deaths in gruesome detail. This forged mental resilience, the ability to keep fighting when everything inside you screamed to run. Festivals exposed trainees to real violence. Gladiatorial bouts where tethered captives fought with obsidian blades until priests ripped their hearts out. Boys watched these spectacles from the front rows. Elders told them, "This is your future gift to the gods." By 17, formal combat training intensified. Students learned to swing the Macuahuitl, a 3-foot oak club embedded with obsidian blades along its edges. This weapon weighed about 5 pounds and could decapitate a horse or slice a man open with one hit. Training meant hacking at wooden dummies until the blades dulled, resharpening them by moonlight with fingers sliced from the work. Defensive drills taught students to use ishkawapili, padded cotton armor soaked in salt water and quilted 12 layers thick. It weighed 10 pounds and chafed like sandpaper in the humid climate, but it could stop an arrow or deflect a glancing blow. Shield work came next. The shamali was a round shield woven from maguey fibers and decorated with feathers, light enough to maneuver quickly but strong enough to block spear thrusts. Students formed into Kaupoli units, groups of 200 that marched in formation to drum beats, learning yaoyol tactics, feints, flanking maneuvers, and ritual disengages at dusk when combat paused for religious reasons. The mental training ran even deeper. Veteran jaguars called Yaotekihuake captains ran stare-down contests where flinching earned thorns shoved under fingernails. Astronomy lessons tied the movements of planets to military strategy, with Mars as the omen of war. Poetry sessions made students memorize the laments of captured enemies, humanizing their future victims before teaching them to ignore that humanity completely. Punishments grew more severe as training progressed. Showing up late meant 20 lashes, the welts festering in sweat. Drunkenness brought beatings until bones cracked like dry reeds, according to one Spanish chronicler who interviewed survivors. The worst punishment was having feathers added to your shame lock, public mockery of your failure to prove yourself. Some boys endured mock sacrifices, bound and dragged to training altars where priests simulated heart extraction to inoculate them against the panic they'd feel when it happened for real. For those selected as Jaguar candidates, advanced training happened in special annexes. 20 selectees per group learned to blend warrior skills with religious ritual. The Jaguar motif connected them to Tezcatlipoca, smoking mirror, god of the night sky, conflict and change. They wore jaguar pelts during ceremonies and painted their bodies with black stripes mimicking spots, their faces smeared blood red. Fasting for days brought hallucinations of the gods. Blindfolded sparring sharpened their senses to animal levels. The worst exposures came during festivals like Tlakaxipoalitzli. Trainees watched from the front as captives fought tethered by one ankle against fully armed Jaguar warriors. Losers were flayed alive, their skins peeled off and worn by the victors who danced through the city streets still dripping. One account describes a captive's final words in Nahuatl, cut short by Obsidian. This taught the essential lesson: capturing enemies alive honored the gods far more than killing them. Sloppy kills wasted divine fuel. By age 20, the trainee had been completely remade. 5 years of grinding had stripped away everything soft and rebuilt him as sinew over bone, will over instinct. Mentors gifted their best students real weapons for the first time, forging bonds like father and son. Graduation meant a scar from ritual piercing, blood offered directly to Tezcatlipoca. The path to Jaguar status was now open. At 20, the youth became Yauyani, a proper warrior, and got thrown into the Xochitl, the Flower Wars. These were prearranged battles with allied enemies like Tlaxcalans, staged specifically to capture prisoners rather than conquer territory. Dawn departure meant oiled bodies gleaming in torchlight, mentors anointing foreheads with eagle blood for luck. Families gathered at the edges of the causeways, weeping and burning copal incense, praying for their sons to return. First battle brought terror. Armies of 20,000 men marched 50 miles to the fighting grounds, drums throbbing like giant heartbeats. Supply chains stretched behind them carrying food, water, and extra weapons. Scouts signaled the dawn charge with conch shell horns. Jaguar warriors led the flanks in their spotted pelt cloaks, Macuahuitls raised. Eagle warriors, their rivals in the other elite order, held the opposite flank. Tactics focused on the flowery death, feigned retreats that lured enemies into ambushes, and ladled darts raining from distance, then close quarters chaos. The goal was always to subdue enemies alive. A warrior's netted opponent thrashed and struggled until a club to the temple knocked them out. Then came the rope bindings. Quick kills were sloppy, reserved only for desperate situations. New warriors served in the baggage train, hauling water and supplies while dodging stray darts. But glory called, spotting a straggler, throwing the net, pinning them with a knee to the back. That first capture mixed euphoria with horror. The enemy's eyes going wide, the intimacy of violence, the way rope bit into wrists. Dragging that body back to camp brought cheers from veterans, but nights brought haunted sleep, gasping faces appearing in dreams. Success meant cutting off the shame lock. The ceremony happened in the town square, elders chanting while the blade sheared the hair amid roaring crowds. One captive earned the rank of Tlamani and a red loincloth. Failure meant keeping the lock, branded as a coward, relegated to porter duty forever. Mentors offered pulque to console the successful ones, finally legal to drink, but shame never fully faded for those who couldn't perform. Battlefield medicine was its own horror. Wounds got cauterized with hot obsidian, screams muffled by rags stuffed in mouths. Gangrene meant amputation without anything to dull the pain, pine resin smeared on the stump to stop the bleeding. One warrior recalled watching a friend's legs sawn off mid-march, blood arcing through the air like rain. Victory feasts followed. Captives paraded through streets adorned in feathers like doomed kings, then locked in wooden cages for transport to Tenochtitlan. This initiation phase weeded out more candidates. Warrior life expectancy hovered around 37 years, with battles claiming 1 in 4 participants. Survivors became addicted to the rush. Buried umbilical cords promised fulfilled in crimson. 4 captives, that was the toll for Jaguar status, a number reflecting the 4 cosmic directions. Over 2 or 3 wars, the warrior hunted. First, a scout netted in the reeds. Second, a noble clubbed unconscious in the melee. Third and fourth in the Flower War chaos, where enemies wore bright regalia that made them easier to spot. Eyewitnesses had to vouch for every capture, comrades and captains confirming the count because fraud would taint the gods. Achievement brought triumph's roar. Return to Tenochtitlan meant processionals down the causeways, captives stumbling in front, the warrior's back banner fluttering in the wind. Ceremony at the Templo Mayor brought priests in flayed human skins to offer blessings, while Tezcatlipoca's obsidian mirrored divine worthiness. Gifts cascaded down. Jaguar pelt suit spotted and supple, the helmet of real fangs and claws. The Tlahuitzli armor in black and red quilted cotton, replacing the plain padding of lower ranks. Full-time warrior status meant no more farming, no more civilian labor, just the endless wheel of war. Status exploded overnight. Commoner to noble in a single ceremony. Land grants and conquered valleys. Palace dinners featuring turkey and mole sauce and cups of frothing chocolate. Concubines selected from tribute slaves. Hair tied back with red cord, green feathers nodding like royal crowns. Jaguar warriors dined at the Tlatoani's table, the emperor's own feast hall, while former equals bowed in the streets. But pressure mounted with every privilege. Jaguars led from the front. Failure now carried consequences that radiated outward. Horrors lingered beneath the glory. Each captive haunted the warrior who took them, their gods cursing back from the spirit world. Some warriors reported hearing voices at night, echoes of men they had dragged to their deaths. One codex depicts a veteran plagued by dreams where his victims rose as jaguars to devour him. Yet power seduced. The spotted pelt became a second skin of supremacy. Daily life as a jaguar meant gilded responsibilities. Dawn patrols guarding the cities, quelling riots with club strikes, escorting Pocteca merchant caravans through hostile territory, and fighting off bandits with atlatl volleys. Midday brought training sessions at the warriors' houses, mentoring the next generation of Telpocali students with harsh encouragement. Strike true or feed the altar. Evenings meant feasts where pulque flowed freely. The warriors competed to tell the best capture stories and elaborate glyph songs. Family came with noble status. Marriage to a noble woman, sons to repeat the cycle, daughters to weave feather capes in stone villas with gardens. But war kept pulling them away. Absences stretching months long, returns marked by new scars. Concubines added complication. One tale describes a jaguar killed by a rival over a slave woman's affection. Privileges dazzled. Jewelry of turquoise and jade. Quetzal feathers worth more than gold by weight. But duty chained them in place. Tax collection, rebellion suppression, temple vigils lasting days. Boredom rarely struck because raids kept the blood running hot. Horror hid in the ordinary moments. Overseeing sacrifices as part of temple duty, blood crusting sandals and drying between toes. One jaguar, after a victory feast, bedded a captive woman who turned out to be the sister of a man he had personally delivered to the altar. Guilt's worm gnawed. War remained theater of absolute terror. Flower wars happened on prearranged schedules with the Tlaxcalans, armies clashing at dawn while conchorns screamed. Jaguars formed the vanguard, spotted phantoms charging, Macuahuitls whistling through the air. Tactics meant encircle, net, bash. Enemies crumpled and got bound like a deer for transport. Conquest wars ran bloodier. Sieges that starved cities into submission. Assaults with hook ladders scaling walls while defenders poured boiling pitch from above. Brutality peaked during captures. Hamstrings slashed to prevent escape. Bodies dragged howling across the battlefield. Self-inflicted wounds honored Tezcatlipoca, warriors piercing their own flesh and letting blood drip in trails behind them. Victory brought processions of 4,000 captives or more, adorned in feathers and paint, shuffling toward the altars. Jaguars delivered the condemned to the Templo Mayor, 114 blood-slicked steps climbing toward the sky. Rituals during Tlacaxipahualitzli meant heart-ripping on an industrial scale. Priests' obsidian knives plunging into chests, still beating hearts raced towards the sun. Gladiatorial rites pitted tethered captives against 4 jaguar warriors at once. Losers got flayed alive, their skins worn by victors who danced through the streets in dripping trophies. Jaguars participated directly, guarding altars, serving as gladiators in training matches, standing witnesses as priest work. A new fire ceremony happened every 52 years, a victim's chest drilled open to kindle the flame that would burn for the next cycle. Cosmic reboot accomplished through screaming. Belief made the horror bearable. Blood bought the sunrise. Without sacrifice, darkness forever. Chroniclers who interviewed jaguar survivors noted their haunted eyes, the 1,000-yard stare of men who had seen too much. Death came for most on the battlefield. Arrows punching through cotton armor mid-charge, clubs pulping skulls in the melee chaos. Some died from infected wounds days after the fighting ended. Fallen warriors got frantic retrieval by comrades when possible, or abandonment to the crows when the fighting went wrong. Souls traveled to Tamonchan, the paradise of warriors, where they would be reborn as hummingbirds hovering near flowers forever. Jaguars sacrificed on their own altars earned rare honor. Tezcatlipoca's chosen, fighting ceremonial combat against other elite warriors, dying bravely for direct entry into godhood. Burial meant 80-day vigils, bodies adorned with jade beads, tombs filled with weapons and treasures. Families mourned with ritualized wailing and codex epitaphs recording their deeds. The afterlife promised eternal battle in the sky, fighting alongside the sun forever. The Jaguar Warriors built an empire that lasted 80 years, their captures fueling the altars that kept the cosmos turning. When Cortez arrived with iron weapons and gunpowder, the the spotted pelts fell to new technology. But the spirit survived in Mexican murals, cultural memory, and stories of resilience passed down through centuries.